sentient life forms of convergence. Welcome to Reverend Matt's Monster Science. Put your appendages together.
I keep telling you, I do this for applause. If you do that at the beginning, there's no reason for me to stay here. But you didn't know that, so I'll do the show anyway. Hi. I'm Reverend Matt, and I don't like robots as much as I used to. They have never been seen very much in my comedy lecture series, Reverend Matt's Monster Science, though this has not historically been for lack of enthusiasm for them on my own part. Rather, it was because, well, one of the questions I really do get the most often is, do robots count as monsters? Usually the answer is, please leave me alone, I'm just trying to use the public restroom. But the real answer is sorta. Generally, I avoid robots in my work because they're not really creatures, but as a narrative thread in speculative fiction, they are all more or less descended from Frankenstein. And, you know, that counts. Now, of course, Frankenstein did not invent the artificial person. The story of an inanimate human figure brought to wondrous life is an old one and not uncommon. In classical antiquity, for example, we see Pygmalion, who crafted a statue so beautiful that he fell in love with it, which may sound super weird. But here in enlightened modernity, there are websites that make extraordinary amounts of money for much, much weirder than that. Many of you run them. Aphrodite, goddess of love and of not judging a man's kinks apparently, looked down on this and brought the statue to life, and Pygmalion and the statue were married. The end. This is thought by scholars as being symbolic of events going on in the Aphrodite cult at the time, though it is usually presented these days as a tale of the power of art, such beauty as it lives and all that sort of thing. On a purely practical note, it has been demonstrated by more than one informal experiment that concentrating on an image of a person you find attractive and thinking about how hot it is brings it to life 0% of the time. Believe me. Perhaps the most famous artificial person in the old stories is the golem, a mute, often huge man made from clay, much as humans were in the beginning in its own mythos, and animated by a rabbi. These are animated for any of a number of reasons: to perform menial work or sacred tasks in the synagogue, or to bolster numbers to achieve the minimum required for a minyan prayer meeting. I was in a bowling team once and two of the guys were made out of clay. I get it. And, perhaps most famously, to defend the Jews of the Prague ghetto from anti-Semitic pogroms in the late 16th century. Now, I'm not a huge World War II enthusiast. Some people are. It's a perfectly good thing to be into. But if there were some golems in there, man. Anyway, these are all great reasons, and in these stories, everything is great for a while, but then something goes wrong, and again, it's any of a number of things. They fail to deactivate the golem on the Sabbath, or it falls in love and is spurned, or it continues to work even when they try to shut it down, a bit like the brooms in Fantasia, which are the inanimate brought to a kind of life of their own, which taught Mickey Mouse humility, symbolic of the great humility of the Walt Disney Corporation. No, we've made enough movies, we own enough things. And then, after this thing goes wrong with the golem, it goes berserk. Luckily, there's a way of fixing this, turning it off and turning it back on again. Or no. Its animating power comes from the word ameth or emet, written on its forehead usually. And this word means truth, or is one of the names of God. According to one scholar I read, quote, not one of the most popular ones, unquote. Burn. Burnsville, Minnesota 55306. But if you rub off the first of the three Hebrew letters making up the word, you were left with just met, meaning death, and abracadabra. So we all learned that truth and God are just one letter away from death, and the world is still hostile and confusing. Also, we have learned to stay on the good side of rabbis. Another relevant artificial person is the homunculus, a tiny little person created by the alchemists, because sometimes you need a tiny little person. I mean, how many of your problems could be solved by owning a tiny little person? All of them is the answer. Problems you didn't even know you had. Homunculi were regarded as symbolic of regeneration and of the spirit made flesh. Most of classical alchemy consisted of metaphors for the process of spiritual uplift and transcendence, as opposed to the modern conception of alchemists, which of course consists of guys who sell you potions of greater healing after you've been mauled by an owlbear. Famed alchemist Paracelsus was the first to refer to homunculi by name, and he described their creation as such: that the sperm of a man be putrefied by itself in a sealed cucurbit for 40 days with the highest degree of putrefaction in a horse's womb, or at least so long that it comes to life and moves itself and stirs, which is easily observed. After this time, it will look somewhat like a man, but transparent without a body. If after this it be fed wisely with the arcanum of human blood, and be nourished for up to 40 weeks, and be kept in the even heat of a horse's womb, a living human child grows therefrom, with all its members like another child, which is born of a woman, but much smaller. So, there you go. Do that. In related news, 13th century Franciscan friar and friggin' sorcerer Roger Bacon, because the church used to be much more metal than it is now, famously fashioned a head made of brass that would answer your questions, apparently truthfully, which is of course better than we're doing now. Though, one imagines that it might sometimes have gone with reply hazy, ask again later. The artificial person is, of course, not purely the domain of the West. For but one example, the native Australian Woolgaru was a giant man made of wood with flint teeth and pebble eyes and human hair, which I feel might have been difficult to collect. I mean, hi, I'm making a giant wooden man. Can I have some of your hair? Sounds easy, but people's reactions are weird. Again, believe me. Its builder was the sorcerer Jarapa, and he built Woolgaru to do his work for him. After 2 days of magic ritual, Woolgaru had not come to life, so Jarapa kicked it and walked back to his village. But as he walked back, he heard huge footsteps following him, and indeed, it was Woolgaru looking furious. So Jarapa hid by a river and watched Woolgaru walk right through it and away in search of his creator. And Woolgaru, it is said, lives to this day, indestructible and punishing transgressors of the law, like Batman does, or Walker, Texas Ranger, if they were a giant, scary wooden guy made by dark sorcery. But of course, the modern artificial person narrative began in 1816. Pardon me, when 18-year-old Mary Shelley and her husband Percy Shelley went on a European holiday with George Gordon Lord Byron, famed poet and passionate advocate of his own penis. Housebound due to bad weather, they decided that they would each write ghost stories. Byron's doctor, Polidori, wrote The Vampire, which was very generative to vampire fiction. Byron wrote just a fragment because he was a famous poet and super passionate and tortured, and you couldn't make him. Percy wrote nothing, maybe a grocery list or something, but if so, it is unrecorded. And teenage Mary Shelley went right ahead and wrote one of the most important works of English literature, often considered the foundation of the entire genre of science fiction, Frankenstein or the modern Prometheus. Too late. This is over 200 years ago, guys. This is famous for being a book about hubris, playing God, the overreach of science, but in fact it really isn't. There's actually very little about any of that in the book. Victor is not, however, a good guy. If you want to assemble a huge yellow dude, he's yellow in the book, if you want to assemble one of those, terrific. I'll make sandwiches. But what happens next after that is appalling. As soon as the creature moves, Victor retires to his bedchamber. He falls asleep and wakes to see the monster standing at his bed, its arm outstretched as if to detain me, quote unquote. Or perhaps reaching and pleading or supplication, but our man Victor doesn't think of that. I am out of here, he says, and leaves his home and wanders the streets, thinking to himself, I sure hope it's not there when I get back. For real, not word for word, but I'm not making this up. He gets back, and the creature is gone, and his reaction is legitimately, phew, glad that's over. Later, when his family's servant Justine is sentenced to hang for a crime that Victor knows to have been committed by the creature and hence to have been basically his own responsibility, he feels super guilty but does nothing. Moreover, he states, to quote, the tortures of the accused did not equal mine. Justine is about to be actually hanged for a crime she didn't commit, and his reaction is, in fact, you think you've got problems. Later, after he agrees to make a bride for the creature at the creature's demand, before he begins to work on this, he changes his mind, not for any ethical or practical concerns, but because he doesn't want to. He goes ahead and refers to having made this promise to a being for whom he is entirely responsible in order to bring that being happiness as slavery. Victor Frankenstein is a romantic, self-involved prat. This is not a story about hubris, but about irresponsibility and abandonment. It may be Shelley's critique of the Romantics and the Byronic hero with their wild passions and astounding lack of basic awareness that anything in the universe besides their own emotions and or penises might even exist. But the story wasn't only just this critique and would grow into something much, much bigger indeed. The first stage play of Frankenstein, for example, came out in 1823, just 5 years after the publication of the first edition of Shelley's book. Written by Richard Brinsley Peake, it was entitled Presumption or the Fate of Frankenstein, and it made several major changes right out of the gate. The monster is fascinated and confused by fire and by music, trying to grab music right out of the air. It is enraptured by the sight of women, because a newly created entity whose mind is a blank slate is certainly going to be all about 19th century standards of beauty and good old-fashioned heteronormativity. He is blue in color, and he is created off stage while a servant narrates it while looking through a keyhole, because if there's one thing nobody cares about in the story of Frankenstein, it's the actual moment of creation. Yawn. This servant, by the way, is called Fritz, and what you've got to understand is that Frankenstein had no assistant in the novel, and moreover that his assistant in the original Karloff movie was in fact also called Fritz. Igor wasn't until the third Universal Frankenstein movie. I've just blown all of your minds right now, and if you need to take a minute, that is too bad because I'm going to keep talking. Fritz in the play is always going on about how scared and nervous he is, stating at one point, I jump like a maggot out of cheese. Oh, like that. So anyway, the appearance of Fritz is one of the two most significant changes to the story going forward, and the other is that in Presumption, the monster is in fact mute for the first time. The monster was played by one Thomas Peter Cook, who would go on to play him in several productions of the story, by one count performing the monster on 365 occasions. In one day. No. He was also believed to be the first person to publicly refer to the monster himself as Frankenstein, though, as we know, say it with me, Frankenstein is not the name of the monster. Frankenstein is the name of the scientist. Wasn't that satisfying? We are all so clever and well-educated. Mary Shelley herself spoke well of presumption, though she refuted the claims in the popular press that it was making ladies just faint dead away. It was a huge hit and well-reviewed, though it was also subject to protests for being blasphemous, specifically against 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 12, which reads, "The angel of the Lord said unto me, please do not put on any plays about Frankenstein." Thanks very much. They were also concerned about Frankenstein using science to play God, the presumption of the title, which was another addition to the story, not a theme of the novel, and also, according to one reviewer, that the play staged a, quote, burlesque of the resurrection, unquote. By burlesque at this time, they of course meant a mockery, though of course if somebody were to do a totally respectful and straightforward staging of the story of the crucifixion and resurrection, only with a lot of dancing and stripping, I expect they could name their price. Now, alongside Frankenstein, the 19th century was very fond of automatons, which were machines that moved like humans and looked like humans. Exactly like humans. I don't know what humans look like to you. But even in fiction, these were still pure machines, either operated directly by humans or moving according to their entirely preset gearwork. It actually appears that the first mechanical person with an artificial mind of its own was TikTok, from the 3rd book in L. Frank Baum's Oz series, which that third of the audience is very excited about. Though quite certainly animate, it is specified that TikTok is not alive and that he is emotionless. Also, he has 3 separate ways in which he must be wound up, literally wound up. One for thinking, one for movement, and one for speech. And the idea that thinking and speech should be completely separate, unrelated things is a pretty deep insight into humanity for, Munchkinland. TikTok also appeared in 1985's Return to Oz, a largely forgotten film that was essentially a horror movie for children. And I don't mean that like showing the Texas Chainsaw Massacre to a 6-year-old, though that is hilarious. But rather, it was like splicing all the old school scary Disney villain sequences, and they could be really scary, into one big movie. It is an amazing film and certainly gets the Reverend Matt's Monster Science official stamp of approval. I will not be making a joke equating TikTok with the popular internet video site of the same name. Please find comfort in the people who love you. But TikTok still wasn't a robot simply because we didn't have the word yet. That would come in 1920 in a theater play from Czechoslovakia entitled RUR, which stood for Rosumovi Univerzalni Roboti, or Rossum's Universal Robots. In this science fiction play by one Karel Kopek, the robots are made from synthetic organic matter and are indistinguishable from humans, but are incapable of original thought. As such, they are workers. Indeed, this is what robot basically means in Czech, more or less, worker. And because this is Eastern Europe in 1920, they have a huge revolution and go ahead and destroy humanity entirely. And though, yeah. Actually, those of you who've seen my shows before know that I'm completely all for that. And though they were not at all mechanical, their name would, of course, become profoundly important to the concept of mechanical people, which marks the last time in Earth history that live theater influenced anything. Okay. That is wrong, you're right. Possibly even more influential, though, is the 1927 silent film Metropolis. We have real mixed feelings about Metropolis, apparently. This is another film about class warfare, though in this one, the robot, Maria, is all about bridging the gap between the working class and the ruling class. Now, in this film, the ruling class is not depicted as a cadre of perpetually shrieking man-babies who would happily nuke the East Coast for a shiny new nickel. Well, that's not fair. A filthy nickel would also do. But then this is a work of imagination. You may have noticed that all of our modern artificial people so far are sympathetic, tragic Frankenstein, and helpful TikTok and the robot worker revolutionaries. This is very unusual for the imagination of non-human intelligence, and though of course it will not remain universally true for robots, it will remain a strong thread going ahead. This is for a variety of reasons. Robots are entities of technology in an outrageously technophiliac society, and also they are, in our narratives, our own creations, our metaphorical children, and we could stand to do right by them. Also worthy of consideration is the relative plausibility of robots. By the middle of the 20th century, we were all hearing about the development of computers, of thinking machines. And there's a concept in early childhood development that has more recently been applied to the study of animal intelligence called theory of mind, which is where a developing baby or an evolving animal starts to realize that other things in their environment have brains of their own. Simplest thing in the world to you and I, but tiny babies and many animals don't have it at all. But humans have it in a runaway fashion. We act as though things have minds that certainly don't. One of my socks ripped the other day, and I yelled at it. And there is indeed a school of thought that speculates that part of the religious urge is theory of mind as applied to the sky, or to the whole universe at once. So, you give us a thing and you tell us that it actually does thinking, and it communicates to us with words, that absolutely is a being, even though it isn't. And so it is off to the races for the robots. In 1941, Isaac Asimov came up with the famous 3 laws of robotics. You probably know them, but just as a refresher, here they are. 1, a robot may not injure a human being or through an action allow a human to come to harm. 2, a robot must obey the orders given it by human beings, except where such orders would conflict with the first law. 3, a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second law. These all sound kind of nice. They're kind of garbage as far as legal mumbo-jumbo is concerned. That through an action allow a human being to come to harm is 20 times vaguer than it might sound. But more importantly, they are all about the most abject of servitude. A robot may protect itself unless a human says otherwise. In one of the trailers for 2004's I, Robot, Will Smith asks what happens if a robot is given an order to kill, which is entirely covered in the laws, which are very short. Look, here they are again. Hollywood's answer to what I've just said would, of course, be shut up, Poindexter, banking perhaps rightly on the concept that people will think only as much as you make them. This concept will become important later. That's foreshadowing. A classic literary technique. In the meantime, though, yes, a smattering of applause for classic literary technique. In the meantime, though, welcome to Robot Parade. And if you got that reference, Robot Parade, well, first of all, have yourself checked for colon cancer. And second of all, you got a reference that most people didn't get, so please take a moment to look all around you with as smug a look on your face as you can possibly manage. We will go on a whirlwind tour of the development of robots in sci-fi, which is, of course, gigantic, and so very, very many will be left out. I will concentrate on robots of particular significance and or funniness, and just my own favorites in general, because it is my show, and I do what I want. If it will omit your favorites, each and every one of them, for each and every one of you, and my motivation for this is, of course, spite. For each and every one of you. Yep. It is with greater regret that I will be focusing mostly, if not entirely, on the Western canon, because even the briefest of thumbnail sketches of just Japanese robots alone would lead me to only one place. We'll begin with the second half of the 20th century. 1951 saw the release of The Day the Earth Stood Still, a movie about a peaceful alien visitor and his robot backup, Gort, who is with us here tonight. Gort is impossibly powerful and terrifyingly silent. His companion says of him, there's no limit to what he could do. He could destroy the Earth. It's actually a scariness that works even now if you're not a total dillhole. And this is, in fact, an extraordinarily good movie, and I actually don't want to say too much about it because many of you haven't seen it, and you need to. I command it. Why are you laughing at that? I will mention that Gort is sometimes called a robot here, because it actually took a few decades after RUR for the pronunciation to standardize. People could have just pronounced it in the original Czech way, but who cares about Czechoslovakia? No one, that's who. That's right, I said it. 1951 is also in the period before people being abducted by UFO occupants had all standardized their stories, which happened worldwide immediately in the wake of the film Close Encounters of the Third Kind, though that is probably a coincidence. But in these days, anything could be piloting the saucers, so surely some of them were robots. In July of 1951, a Fred Reagan was flying his Piper Cub over an undisclosed American location when he was struck by a pulsating lozenge-shaped craft. This is one of my favorite things about the UFO lore, by the way, the frequency with which they just crash into things. They've managed to get themselves across light years of space to a tiny blue dot, but then, whoa, do you know how to fly this thing? Pilot and plane, human pilot and plane, are plummeted to the earth, but then Reagan finds himself pulled upward by what he would later describe as a sticky, clinging force. You know, that kind of force. And soon found himself aboard the Lozenge in the presence of several glistening, 3-foot-tall metallic asparaguses. They apologized for the accident, gave him a medical scan, and learned that he had cancer, which they then cured for him as a way of apologizing for the crash. Gosh, thanks, robot asparaguses. And that's not a con at all. Oh, we've discovered that you have cancer, but now we've cured it, and now that we've done that, we're cool, right? Of course, motive for this sort of con is difficult to imagine. If the robots were afraid they were going to get in trouble, the question is, of course, with whom? Anyway, they then deposited him in a field next to his plane's wreckage. The engine had embedded itself 6 feet into the ground. Fred Reagan died less than a year later in the Georgia State Asylum for the Insane, though it is unrecorded what got him checked into there. Perhaps people didn't believe his story about contrite robot asparagus doctors from beyond the stars for some reason. Or perhaps it was to do with his reported cause of death, degeneration of the brain tissue. There's maybe something of a chicken and the egg problem here, I'm afraid. But just to add a troubling twist, it is also reported that this brain degeneration was caused by exposure to extreme atomic radiation. The implication then is that aliens can cure cancer, but don't know that radiation is bad for us. Between that and the piloting, aliens are lousy at everything. Our last cinematic robot, Gort, was a grand and majestic figure. Our next cinematic robot is not. From 1953's Robot Monster, part man, part robot, part monster, all cop. Roman here is, of course, constructed from a diving helmet and a gorilla suit, and is, of course, the beginning of the ultra-cheap, ultra-weird 1950s B-movie sci-fi. He's not the beginning, but he's part of it. As such, I am not going to make any more fun of it here, because what would be the point? I am also not going to defend it for the same reason. 1956's Forbidden Planet would be... My next show, I'm just going to name movies. 1956's Forbidden Planet would be another excellent 50s science fiction film. Its Robbie the Robot was extremely helpful and unbelievably powerful and just generally great to be around. As such, and also probably because of his striking and kind of bubbly construction, he would become wildly popular and would go on to appear briefly in countless movies and TV shows. Here he is meeting the Addams Family, becoming sort of the Stan Lee cameo of old school sci-fi. Anyway, skipping ahead, God damn it. There we go. Skipping ahead to 1962, here we have Irona, or possibly Irna. She's from the comics, so pronunciation is not clear. Fully functioning, voice-communicating humanoid robots such as this are, of course, well beyond the capabilities of 2026 technology, to say nothing of 1962. But, of course, nothing is beyond the means of Irona's owner, bloated plutocrat Richie Rich. What other world-changing, indeed possibly life-saving technologies are the riches withholding from us? More importantly, where 1962 comics are concerned is of course, the beginning of the age of Marvel. Now, Marvel's treatment of the concept of the robot tends to be, shall we say, freewheeling. Here we have the Vision, one of whose primary superpowers is walking through walls and such, which is not really how I think of, metal. Meanwhile, over in DC, we have the Red Tornado, and he has wind powers. And what is happening? What is happening? Well, I'll tell you what's happening. Robotics has now become a blanket explanation for any weirdness you like, much like outer space or radiation at this time, or martial arts in the right sort of film, or witchcraft in 17th century Europe. All the explanation you need for anything you need. My own favorite of the big two superhero comic robots would definitely have to be the Doombots. Numberless replicas of Dr. Doom built by the supervillain himself. Some of Doom's writers have declared that previous Dr. Doom appearances were malfunctioning Doombots, explaining his erratic and inconsistent behavior. And that is genius. And every single character in the Marvel Comics universe needs it. Daredevil bots, Aunt May bots. Also in 1962, the premiere of The Jetsons with Rosie the Robot. We're fans of a lot of things. Like most technology in The Jetsons, Rosie spent a lot of time not working properly, like a lot of technology in The Jetsons, which was just one of the many reasons why The Jetsons is actually the most accurate depiction of the future ever imagined. The only way they could have come closer is if they talked about how the Jetsons' subscription to Rosie, how the Jetsons had a subscription to Rosie to make her ever work at all, and if she delivered 20 minutes of ads per hour. I've been really mean to American advertisers just now. The following year saw the debut of the comic book Magnus Robot Fighter. It is the future, and robots have conquered the Earth, an early iteration of what is now one of the most basic robot defaults. But one man dare stand against them. He is known as Magnus, and he knows how he will defeat the mechanical overlords. It is by punching them. Hold on. Yeah, that's right. That's what it says here, punching them. I mean, karate chop here, I guess. That's pretty great. The 1964 sitcom My Living Doll has a robot built for space exploration, but that is disguised as a human and taught the ways of society through her innocence, naivety, and literalness by a lonely bachelor. The robot is played by Julie Newmar, and that's just engineering, That is the best possible design for space exploration robots. If it hadn't been for budgetary constraints, the Mars rover would have just been Julie Newmar, wandering around Mars. Now, this robot is not really a sex bot. The stories are remarkably chaste. Indeed, the bachelor's sister lives with the pair as a chaperone so that nobody thinks anything untoward is going on, and yeah, that'll do it. But again, Julie Newmar. You don't need explicitly sexy stories to put ideas in people's heads here. Her co-star, Bob Cummings, was reportedly very angry much of the time that Newmar was getting more attention than him. And wow, really? No kidding. The 60s were a good time for this sort of nonsense. Witness this: I Dream of Jeannie, My Favorite Martian, Bewitched, Mr. Ed, and on and on. But My Living Doll was canceled after just one season nevertheless. Weirder than that, only 11 of its 26 episodes survive. The rest are lost. 60 years later, prolonged heavy sigh. I mean, We need to find them. I'm not saying they're the Ark of the Covenant, but that doesn't mean they won't melt Nazis. But we're seeing the proliferation in the robot idea here. Still a lot of servants, though, and Roman was just one of many evil robot alien invaders. But now we're seeing the coming machine apocalypse, and I've just used the word sex bot, and you all knew what I was talking about. It actually took us a surprisingly long time here to ascribe feminine sexual traits to a trope that has centered on servility, because humans are, of course, trash. But once again, we're off to the races. 1965's Dr. Goldfoot and the Bikini Machine. Is a movie, whose name I will not mention again, where Vincent Price builds a bunch of bikini robots to seduce wealthy men, and there's Frankie Avalon and so forth, and some parts of the 1960s were fascinating and progressive, and other parts were Dr. Goldfoot and the Bikini Machine. Still, Vincent Price is clearly having a great time, and I do support that. Another real-life, sort of, UFO encounter, not too far from this very spot. At roughly 7:40 p.m. on October 23rd, 1965, Jerry Townsend was driving outside of Long Prairie, Minnesota, when his car suddenly went dead. In front of him, he saw a rocket-shaped object 30 to 40 feet tall. He got out of his car, a bold choice, but one often made in these cases, and saw moving toward him 3 6-inch tall metal objects shaped like beer cans, waddling on their pairs of fins, aiming downward, and occasionally stopping to rest on a third kickstand-like fin. Eventually, they waddled back into the robot and took off into the sky. Townsend went to the police station to report this. Another bold choice, but again, a frequent one. And the police reported that Townsend seemed genuinely terrified and that he was a man of good reputation. And so, was Jerry Townsend really visited by walking beer cans from beyond the stars? There are, of course, people who believe that what he was actually visited by that night was quite a lot of wholly terrestrial beer cans, and that this was the source of his sighting, though I must mention that I myself have become drunk upwards of 6 times in my life. And on none of those occasions did I experience actual audio-visual hallucinations. That is not a thing. I believe myself to be more attractive than I actually am, but that is a different thing. Now here we have Mechanikong. Oh, after some of it, anyway. Mechanikong is the best. From 1967's King Kong Escapes, put out by Toho Studios, the Godzilla people. I don't mean the Godzilla people as the people who put out the Godzilla movies. I mean half human, half Godzilla. Anyway, the villain of this piece, Doctor Who bears no connection to the British television show that some people are maybe a little bit into. But nevertheless, please contribute to my GoFundMe to purchase the US rights to this film and release it as Doctor Who meets King Kong, and then spend the rest of my life lighting cigars with $100 bills. Moving on, this Doctor Who begins the movie using his invention, Mechanikong, to dig for ore at the North Pole. Now, you might say there's no land at the North Pole, and that maybe a giant ape is not the most optimal design for a mining device. But do you have this hair? No. You do not. But in any case, Mechanikong is a kaiju and a robot, and thus is unquestionably a monster, even without the Frankenstein lineage brought into it. Listen. This is from a 1956 issue of Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, and it has been proposed that children in 1956 didn't generally know the word programmed, hence trained, and this was, of course, a children's comic. So that might explain that one part. I've always liked Huey, Dewey, and Louie from the 1972 film Silent Running. They look to me like actual robots might, mobile machines rather than simple moving metal human sculptures. They're in a movie about bringing Earth's plant life back from extinction in a space habitat, and it is not more exciting than it sounds, but then sometimes they could take things slow in the 1970s, and that is not actually bad. Though, of course, the 70s had their excitement as well. 1974's Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. In this movie, as well as in its direct sequel, Terror of Mechagodzilla from 1975, Mechagodzilla is a creation and agent of simian aliens from the third planet from the black hole. You know, that planet. Built as an anti-Godzilla measure, because if the serious study of history has taught us anything, is that the best solution to most problems is building a robot version of that problem. By the way, 1992's Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla would have a different Mechagodzilla that is not from space. Instead, he is of human design, made as an anti-Godzilla countermeasure. He is also not a robot, as before, but instead a vehicle. Now, there is a persistent myth among men that potential sexual partners are very interested in what kind of car they drive. This is, for the most part, untrue, but of course, if you're behind the wheel of a Mechagodzilla, ladies. In episode 16 of season 3 of The $6 Million Man, airing in 1976, aforementioned $6 Million Man fights Bigfoot, played by Andre the Giant. But of course he doesn't. Bigfoot isn't real. It turns out he's a robot controlled by space aliens. What kind of weirdo would think that Bigfoot is real? Of course, one can hardly mention The $6 Million Man, about a man with extensive cybernetic reconstruction, for you young ones, without mentioning that accounting for the last 50 years of inflation and changes in the American healthcare system. If The $6 Million Man were made today, it would be about a dude who'd had an appendectomy. Anyway, I am sorry about what I said about the 70s not being exciting. Also from 1976, Logan's Run is a deeply... No, keep doing it. Is a deeply weird movie that I'm not going to attempt to summarize. I did a panel on it with like 5 other people about 7 or 8 years ago here, and we all working together could barely manage to summarize it. But I think you were all at that panel, so it's okay. Its robot character is Box, who really just waves his arms and yells, "Fish, plankton, protein from the sea." In the future, they have finally developed the technology to build a robot that mostly just yells, "Fish, plankton, protein from the sea," and it is obviously a golden age. In all seriousness, this is an example of another new development in the robot story. The robots are going crazy now. Perhaps our trust in technology is wearing thin. Then, there was a film from 1977, you probably haven't heard of it, called Star Wars. And its richly visualized world had tons of robots, far too many to go into here, and serving countless purposes: good, evil, comic relief, baffling. Actually, I do know what these are for in universe. They are huge batteries that can walk around and talk in droid language about whatever batteries need to talk about. Look, I love Star Wars enormously. I have multiple high-end lightsabers, but much of it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Please do not get mad about any Star Wars. It is nonsense. Good, great, wonderful, fun nonsense. The very first film had what is still my favorite of the universe's countless droids, the RA-7, specifically the black kind. It doesn't do anything in the movie, and indeed in the lore it's basically just a protocol droid, but it looks totally badass. And in Star Wars, that counts for everything. Remember how much we loved Boba Fett before he actually did anything? And how much we hated him when he did? Another major franchise robot debuting in 1977 was K-9 from Doctor Who. That one I expected. K9 is, of course, perfect. He is what R2-D2 would be if he was also a good boy. His name is a word for dog, but it is also the letter K and the number 9, like how robots are named for some reason. Do you get it? Hooray for K9. But did you know that there was, in 2009, an Australian Doctor Who spin-off show, K9? Now, if you've never watched this show, K9, let me give you a quick... Yeah, there's some sort of big hairy gremlin in the back. Let me give you a quick episode guide. Do not watch K9. That's your episode guide. We love the character of K9. He's voiced by the same guy in this, but this show is just awkward and weird in a bad way. It's a children's show set in a grim future dystopia. There are black-clad robot Gestapo. I'm making it sound interesting, but let me tell you, no. 1978 was the year of the original radio drama version of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy with its very famous Marvin, aka Marvin the Paranoid Android. Like many robots, he chafes at his life of servitude. Unlike most, though, he's just performatively depressed about it. I don't really have a lot of jokes about Marvin. If you like Reverend Matt's Monster Science, you'll love The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So I will simply present this picture from the illustrated Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy from 1994 because I am extremely hardcore and hipster about Douglas Adams. Ash from Alien is an evil robot infiltrator. The being who looks human but isn't is a machine under the command of distant and sinister forces. He is unusually full of sticky-looking fluids for a robot, but then this is a future of mostly body horror. Remarkably, though, his successor in Aliens, Bishop, I don't know why I just picked these pictures, is an extremely decent guy, but played by Lance Henriksen, so still kind of alarming. Fun trivia fact, Lance Henriksen bought some crazy double pupil contact lenses with his own money for the role, and our man James Cameron wouldn't let him wear them due to the already alarming vibe that he gave out. Now, we might as well talk about 1980s heartbeeps. Talk to your kids about heartbeeps. Now, I have reason to believe that very many of you have no idea what you're looking at right now, and there's a reason for that. Heartbeeps grossed less than a fifth of its budget, and its male lead, none other than Andy Kaufman, not having his finest hour here, would later apologize for the movie on Letterman, offering to refund the money of everyone who had seen it. Letterman suggested that he'd better have change for a 20. So that's why you don't know about it. You haven't seen it. Nobody has. I mean, I have, but I had to for work. So, here's what happens in this movie. Two robots, played by Kaufman and Bernadette Peters, also not having her finest hour, set out into the woods to collect data, and they fall in love, I guess, and they build a little robot called Phil, who is voiced by Jerry Garcia, because, dude, what if Jerry Garcia, oh, never mind. They are also followed around by a robot called Catskill, who just tells Rodney Dangerfield-style one-liners, only without writing or talent. That's what he does. And they basically sort of wander around the woods for most of the film's mercifully short run time. What is happening? Why did someone make this film? Well, it's really anyone's guess. The closest speculation I can come up with is that they say a lot of robot things in the movie, such as, to quote, "Val, my safety monitor is now extremely active. I would now like to submit a second request for slower speed." And I feel like this is supposed to be amusing. Suffice it to say, it's not. But one of the things we are dealing with throughout tonight's selection of topics is technophilia, the fetishization of, or at least fascination with, technology, which was wildly and conspicuously proliferating all around us throughout this period, leading us to deal with it emotionally in various ways, just not always very good ones. Just the following year, though, things got a little better. It was Blade Runner, a haunting and powerful movie about servitude and identity and what it means to be human. I won't go on about it because I'm guessing you are familiar with it, and I am here to educate, not to make cheap jokes, oh heavens no. But I will mention, as in RUR, these are entities made of synthetic flesh rather than metal and wiring, which is the more remarkable because the book on which it is very loosely based is called Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? I will also mention that our man Roy Batty here was just 4 years old when he died, which means he must have been pre-programmed with a lot of poetic soul. And finally, where did you get that dove? Leave that dove alone, for God's sake. Now, a thing I only vaguely remembered for a number of years was a live-action children's TV show featuring a hamburger-shaped floating robot with a head with big, sad eyes. And I would occasionally try to figure out what this TV show was, but searching online for hamburger-shaped floating robot with a head with big, sad eyes was too much for Google. Then, sitting on a panel a few years ago at a Doctor Who convention about forgotten sci-fi TV, my co-panelist, fellow one-time Convergence guest of honor, Miss Shannon Paul, brought out a picture of this very robot, and I genuinely began yelling at the top of my lungs in the thrill of rediscovery. The robot, it turned out, was Zax from the 13-episode 1983 show Benji, Zax, and the Alien Prince. An effort to revive the decades-old Benji franchise. An effort that was, of course, unimaginably successful and explains why Benji is the unstoppable entertainment juggernaut that it is today. Zax is a robot servant of Yubi, an exiled prince from the planet Antars, and we are told has level 2 programming, as opposed to his evil counterpart, Zord, who has level 10 programming, which is obviously much better, even if, just as obviously, none of this has any meaning whatsoever. Benji, Zax, and the Alien Prince. Benji, Zax, and the Alien Prince. Truly, we live in an age of wonders. Our next two entries are also universally known in a crowd such as this, a clever, witty, and remarkably physically attractive crowd such as this. And so I will simply check in with our next two entries. The T-800 from 1984's The Terminator teaches us that ruthless analytical machine efficiency demands that humanity be exterminated, and it also demands that this be done with a perfectly human body frame and a super scary skull head. And the Transformers, who were... that side, into it. They're more than meets the eye, and they are alien robots who transform into ordinary Earth vehicles to pass undetected among us. And also into ordinary Earth UFOs, ordinary Earth blaster guns, and ordinary Earth robot dinosaurs to pass undetected among us. Now, back to the important education. Debuting in 1986 and running for 4 seasons, Small Wonder is... No, not yes. Small Wonder is often thought of as the worst television show ever made. And I am very obsessed with it. For those of you who haven't seen it, it is difficult to describe what exactly the problem is here. The little girl robot, kept as a daughter by the family of the father whose father created her, is named Vicky, or VICI, meaning Voice-Activated Child Identicant. And identicant, I fear, is absolutely not a word. But that is probably not the problem here. Part of the problem is that everybody in it is either utterly incompetent or conspicuously half-assing it. The leads, the walk-ons, the directors, the set designers, probably the craft services tables. The child actors often seem to have no idea what it is they're actually saying, though in their defense, neither do the adult actors. The jokes are middle of the road, so predictable that they become unpredictable. Indeed, it would be impossible to tell that most of them were jokes, save, of course, for a laugh track. And the dullness of the jokes is rivaled only by the stultifying plotting. Allow me to read just a few plot summaries from an episode guide. Jamie learns the value of consistent honesty when he can't convince his parents that he's not responsible for breaking a teapot. Ted is motivated to get the family into shape when an obese coworker loses a record amount of weight. Jamie tries to make for the Pee Wee football team. If these do not sound like interesting, innovative, and thoughtful plots to you, you probably will not like Small Wonder. If these do sound like interesting, innovative, and thoughtful plots to you, put a bullet in your head. I wrote it down. I mean it. Now, Vicky is at the center of Small Wonder, or rather, her actress, Tiffany Brissett, is. I have said that everyone on this show is either incompetent or phoning it in, but the young Miss Brissett, poor girl, is the single exception. She is absolutely giving it her all, supported entirely by scripts and actors that would make Cate Blanchett look like an idiot. And she's not half bad either, so far as can be told through the haze of compost that is this show. In particular, there's an ongoing shtick where Vicky perfectly mimics something and Brissett accounts for herself admirably. There's one where she has to do a vaudeville dancing act and she's great. There's one where she's Marilyn Monroe and everyone else involved should almost certainly be under arrest, but she does a good job, goddammit, and a few where she plays an evil robot duplicate of herself called Vanessa, and she is amazing. By the way, in this plotline, the evil robot twin, who is evil because she wears her sweater around her shoulders, has human emotions that Vicky lacks and thinks herself superior to humanity. This is, as the tiny handful of actual nerds out there will know, precisely similar to the data and lore plotline on Star Trek: The Next Generation. And the Small Wonder plotline aired a year before it. Take that knowledge to your grave. It is my curse upon you. Tiffany Brissett later became a nurse, I think, not just to get out of acting, but because after what she had been party to, she needed to dedicate the rest of her life to healing. Small Wonder was actually wildly popular in its time in countries around the world. I can't prove that this is why other countries hate us now, but you do the math. The concept of the robot disguised as an ordinary human child was a popular one in those days. Again, we are their creators, after all, and the 80s was another technophiliac time, if really stupidly so. I myself read the series of mid-80s young adult novels called Not Quite Human, about a robot disguised as a 13-year-old boy and put into middle school. His name is Chip, because they are trying not to arouse suspicion that he is a machine. In spite of this masterful subterfuge, he occasionally risks discovery because of his superhuman strength and flawless memory, which are, of course, struggles any teen can relate to. Any teen can also relate to whatever the hell is going on the cover of this picture. Listen, it's plainly labeled. If it breaks your camera, that's on you. 1986's Chopping Mall by Julie Corman, Roger Corman's wife, starts with some teenage mall employees having an after-hours party in the furniture store where some of them work. And really, where better? It is the ultimate party venue. They all very quickly pair off and start having sex. They are focused on by the camera one by one, but it is clear they are in the open layout furniture store having sex in front of each other. Except, that is, for the two gentle nerds. Meanwhile, lightning strikes the control computer for the new mall security robots, and they go on a kill-crazy rampage. And if you don't know what happens next, I hope your trip from Tibet was a good one, and your leader, the Dalai Lama, is an inspiration to us all. Indeed, the teens are murdered in order of licentiousness, and only the abstainers survive. It's a pretty standard teenage subtractor film, marred primarily by its robots. They look kinda scary. They have scary voices that say, "Have a nice day," after they murder someone, which is, of course, the sort of Wildian wit that these movies do trade in. Elsewhere, after some of the teens get some guns in a sporting goods store, and God bless the USA, one of them says, "Let's send those fuckers a Rambogram." So again, it's the Algonquin Round Table up in here. The guns, by the way, are ineffective since these are the sorts of robots that are made of metal rather than, say, the cheese kind. They have scary heads, they shoot laser blasts that make cool old War of the Worlds noises, and the lack of those is definitely the Achilles heel of real mall security, but they're also short and dumpy, and they make a lot of noise and are very, very slow. It takes more than ironic catchphrases to make a movie scary when it is about 3 angry R2-D2s. Finally, and worst of all, the robots kill people by laser, electrocution, and with their grippers. But there is, in fact, no chopping in the movie Chopping Mall. Yeah. We have discussed sex bots, a trope that tends to be about submission and programmability, when it's not just about techno-fetishism. But there is a film that flips the script, though, 1987's Making Mr. Right, directed by Susan Seidelman after her great success with Desperately Seeking Susan. Here, a male robot, played by John Malkovich, is built by an arrogant and honestly autistic-seeming scientist, also played by John Malkovich, for space exploration. And his lab hires a marketing firm to improve the android's image, which is taken care of by a woman played by Anne Magnuson, who, as you can see here, is my best friend. Thank you. Friendship is worth applauding. Antics and mix-up ensue, and the robot learns how to love and loses interest in the space mission. The android, named Ulysses, as he has been built for an odyssey, is not really about being mechanical. He has no superpowers to speak of. Rather, his artificial status serves to make him a full-grown child. And it has been suggested that when John Malkovich dies, they should use this picture. He is a man who has to be taught the simplest basics of human interaction. Like the fantasy woman androids, Ulysses is an innocent, but here the appeal seems less to be about submission and moldability, in spite of the film's title, but rather about his genuineness and lack of ego. The human men in this film are all portrayed as jerks, albeit in a manner that can only be called realistic. And excellent, I'm past time, but excellent fictional robot work continues. Do I need to tell you about Bender from Futurama? If I do, get your life together. I might need to tell you about Atomic Robo, a comic book I once heard described derisively as Hellboy with a 50s science fiction skin. And first of all, are you kidding? That's awesome. And second of all, it's even better than that. It is, in fact, my favorite comic book. But I still don't like robots as much as I used to. And why that is may be hinted at in the 2008 film WALL-E. Now, I love WALL-E himself. He is not the problem. Everybody sit down. He is charming and delightful, but he lives in a world where humanity has been reduced to entirely passive consumers, doing nothing, learning nothing, creating nothing. And that's beginning to get scarier. And the reason for that, and for my diminished love for robots, is, as every single one of you guessed at the very beginning, AI. I could, of course, go on and on. Half of AI is appalling, and the other half, the half that looks or sounds good, is rapidly destroying our ability to communicate truthfully to one another. There is, of course, the plagiarism, the putting artists out of work, where art is, of course, a thing that people actually want to do, and that was already virtually impossible to make a living doing. There's the erosion of people's ability to write for themselves, which is very much connected to people's abilities to form coherent, communicable thoughts for themselves. There is the nightmarish environmental toll. And there is a thing that is too little mentioned, for my thinking. AI is literally a homogenizing machine. It takes input and creates averages. Again, literally, that's its whole thing. AI cannot invent. It cannot have new ideas. And we have been struggling, thank you, we have been struggling with the homogenization of culture, with everything becoming the same for decades at least. We don't need an incredibly powerful tool to help. So, thank you for coming to my show, which I wrote entirely by myself. Because I wanted to, and which a robot could not have done, except for maybe Zax. He's very cute. Thank you. I'm still over time, but one quick thing, and then run out of here. I'll be outside. Thank you for coming to my show. Thank you so much to Convergence. I'll be hanging around after the show, but please come to my meet and greet tomorrow at 12:30 p.m. at Exhibit Hall Signing Table B. We can talk robots and other monsters. I can sign stuff if you like. I won't have anything of my own to sign, but I would like to mention, in 2028, I will have something to sign, because in fall of 2027, Tor Publishing's brand new Wildthorn imprint will be publishing Reverend Matt's Monster Science, my own encyclopedia. Edited by Lee Harris, darling of Convergence, my own encyclopedia of monsters, and I very much hope you enjoy it, or at least purchase it. Thank you. Thank you again.